Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Cody Proctor. This is the KREM 2 News Week in Review, where each weekend we bring you headlines from the past week in the Inland Northwest. Let's get started with one of the biggest news stories of the past few days.
We got him.
Authorities identified the suspected gunman in Wednesday's fatal shooting of Charlie Kirk as 22-year-old Tyler Robinson of Utah.
A family member of Tyler Robinson reached out to a family friend who contacted the Washington County Sheriff's Office with information that Robinson had confessed to them or implied that he had committed the incident.
The development comes after the FBI released surveillance video overnight of a person seen on a roof then jumping down.
Investigators interviewed a family member of Robinson who stated that Robinson had become more political in recent years. Inscriptions on the 3 unfired casings read, "Hey fascist!" Catch!
Essentially, somebody that was very close to him turned him in.
President Trump broke the news on Fox and Friends, saying a minister and the father of the suspect helped in the arrest.
I hope he's going to be found guilty, I would imagine, and I hope he gets the death penalty. What he did, Charlie Kirk was the finest person. He didn't deserve this.
The 31-year-old conservative activist was shot and killed Wednesday at Utah Valley University during one of the college campus debates that he became famous for. On Thursday, Vice President J.D. Vance, who is a close friend of Kirk's, along with the second lady and Kirk's widow, escorted his body home to Arizona on board Air Force Two. Andres Gutierrez, CBS News, Orem, Utah.
As the sun set quietly over Lake Coeur d'Alene, a crowd of hundreds along its shores, including Valerie Doyle, are making themselves heard.
And I'm so brokenhearted and angry. And I wanted to come here and support and be around all the like-minded people that loved him dearly.
Community members like Doyle gathered at the Avista Pavilion in McEwen Park for a candlelight vigil to remember the life of well-known conservative political activist Charlie Kirk. Kirk was shot and killed during a speaking event in Utah Wednesday night at 31 years old. Organizer Patrick Wolf says when he first saw what happened, he knew he had to do something to pay tribute to his work.
And that initial moment is like shock, right? I think everyone had this collective shock that occurred, but the calls for prayers, of course, became very evident.
Wolf was one of many who spoke to the crowd during the vigil. He and other speakers emphasized their support for Kirk and his work touring college campuses across the country, including here in the Inland Northwest. The crowd eventually held candles up commemorating his life and work, as well as praying for safety for his family. Wolf says the incident struck him not just as a supporter, but as a husband and father as well.
They wake up in the morning and I get them to jump in my bed and, give me hugs and kisses. And the tragedy of that is, 2 kids have lost a father and a wife has lost a husband. And I think that's what really hurts.
As members of the Coeur d'Alene community raise their candles high, Doyle hopes his death will not be forgotten, and people on either side of the aisle show sympathy for his family while they're in mourning.
I think everybody needs to come together and know that this was a tragedy. And I'm looking forward to whoever committed this assassination to be caught and justice will be served.
In Coeur d'Alene, Connor McAvoy, KREM 2 News.
As we go to break, here's a check of your forecast. Welcome back to the KREM 2 News Week in Review. It has been a busy week all across the Inland Northwest, so let's catch you up on some of the news you might have missed.
It's been 2 months since House Bill 2118 went into effect, and the owner of Sharpshooting Indoor Range and Gun Shop said this is costing him a pretty penny. Step inside Sharpshooting Indoor Range and Gun Shop.
All these cases are thick steel. They have reinforced laminated glass.
And you'll find owner Jeremy Ball talking about new security measures his store added over the past several months.
You can touch the gun, however, you cannot remove it. It is impossible to get off of here.
Ball's one of many firearm dealers in Washington state needing to update security after the passing of House Bill 2118. It requires business owners to hold annual employee background checks, 24/7 audio and video surveillance where firearms are sold or displayed, and mandatory liability insurance coverage of at least $1 million per incident. The law, entitled Protecting the Public from Gun Violence by Establishing Additional Requirements for the Business Operations of Licensed Firearms Dealers, is set to prevent theft of firearms and straw purchases, meaning a person buying a firearm on behalf of someone who legally can't. The bill was signed into law in March of 2024 and went into effect in July of this year. Ball says he spent roughly $150,000 keeping up with the new state requirements he feels won't change his security.
It was a lot of money, and now we've got, these extra security measures that honestly are not likely to prevent anything because we've never had any problems in the first place.
Ball says the money would have gone to expanding his business, but says that won't be the case for now.
We were on track to do some major renovations to the range side of the business, and unfortunately all of that stuff was put on hold because of that.
Despite the financial setback, Ball says the changes to his store won't change how he and his staff serves their customers.
We'll wait out this next legislative cycle, and hopefully there are not further restrictions for Washington residents.
We've reached out to state representatives Amy Wallen and Liz Berry, who introduced the bill before becoming law, but have not heard back. We've also reached out to State Representative Jim Walsh. We did not hear back, but he's been on record since the bill's introduction, saying it's bad policy that will not stop criminal activity. Connor McAvoy, KREM 2 News.
The Community Collective put out a list of 7 demands for state and local governments and law enforcement. It all comes just after a June 11th protest over the detainment of 2 men, which led to several more arrests. 9 people still face federal charges after protesting the immigration detention of 2 men in June. Now a collective voice is calling for those charges to be dropped among a list of other demands.
I saw a young woman in pain shoved to the ground by an officer in riot gear for adjusting her cuffs.
Amy Manning was one of those protesting.
Many of us were held in cuffs for more than 4 hours. Some of us were held in sweltering vans and not allowed to use restrooms.
She and others now demand local law enforcement protect the right to peacefully protest with transparency and de-escalation.
A committed response that's transparent, collaborative, and clear for protesters, because that day was also, it wasn't really clear who was in charge, and we were given a lot of conflicting direction.
The group says they want immigrants protected from the Trump administration, asking for local and state government to do more.
To support legislation requiring ICE agents to identify themselves and provide judicial warrants.
People are being disappeared, not just here in Spokane, but across our state and across our nation. We would like to see due process for everyone. It's in the Constitution.
Spokane City Council member Paul Dillon says it may take creativity and policy to make it happen.
And to look at what are the policy levers that we can pull that are constitutional. That will stand.
He points to the original Safe and Welcome in Spokane ordinance from 2018, which bars immigration agents from warrantless access to non-public city property.
Of what country are you a citizen?
Arrests and checks of buses led to public outcry, and the original version of the city law.
So there's precedence, I think, for the city, for the state, taking on the Trump administration and winning.
Council recently updated the law to provide protection at private events on city property. Border Patrol did respond, saying its agents follow federal law which supersedes that of the state or city, and that warrants are not required for arrests of those unlawfully in the country. The KREM 2 News reached out to the city, county, and local law enforcement for their response on these demands. Aaron Hutt with Mayor Lisa Brown's office says they have met with some members of this group. They're looking into creating a community fund for emergency aid for immigrant populations. Shannon Mowdy, KREM 2 News.
Thanks for joining KREM 2 News this weekend. I'm Cody Proctor. Right now, we're taking a look back at some of the news stories from the past week in this edition of the KREM 2 News Week in Review.
Well, one thing was clear in Thursday's State of the County address. Crime and public safety are top of mind and heavily invested in. Spokane County Commission Chair Mary Cooney highlighted the board's increases in funding for Spokane Treatment and Recovery Services, or STARS, for a new facility. She says the county is also invested in combating the drug crisis to save lives.
We are on trend to lose one person to an overdose death every day in 2025. That is unacceptable. To address this crisis, the board has invested in an additional drug analyst for the Sheriff's Office, who is working closely with federal and state partners to aggressively combat drug trafficking.
The county has also hired 50 new deputies in the last 18 months.
And I'm pleased to report that we are now fully staffed with almost 270 deputies for the first time in 20 years.
It's not just deputies out on Spokane County streets. Sheriff John Knoll says the Real-Time Crime Center and its 6 cameras on wheels have been critical in cutting crime. He says even stopping it before it happens. He credits one crime center analyst for calling in a suspicious situation.
And what we learned at the end of this was the man that was interacting with those 14-year-old girls and acting suspiciously, we were able to identify him as one of our registered sex offenders here in Spokane County. These cameras make a difference.
Beyond crime, construction was also a top highlight in the past year. CUNY says construction investments hit the second highest in county history.
We anticipate new construction in Spokane County will exceed $1.4 billion,
bringing in almost $1 million in revenue. But the county does face challenges in the next year, facing a projected budget deficit of $20 million.
Seeing this early, the board acted, put a freeze on non-essential hiring, and asked all departments to dig deep and reduce spending by 7%.
The board's expected to adopt the new budget in early December. Shannon Mowdy, KREM 2 News.
Right now, I'm standing right outside Canfield Mountain because today's 9/11 ceremony was extra heavy for the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office as they honored both those who have sacrificed across the country and right here in North Idaho. Grief, loss, fear, and hope were all mentioned within a crowd who gathered in Coeur d'Alene at Silver Lake Mall.
September 11th is 2001 is this generation's "Where were you" moment. I remember hearing that phrase. Love you, Bob. Love you too. From my parents about the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Kootenai County Sheriff Bob Norris teared up in front of the crowd, reflecting on not just the impacts of 9/11, but violence North Idaho has seen this summer, between the deadly carjacking incident on the state line and the ambush attack on Canfield Mountain that killed 2 firefighters.
The political violence and the political disorder that is occurring in this nation and this community has got to stop.
The event's keynote speaker, a father of 4 from Meridian, Idaho, who lost his ability to walk serving in Iraq. He moved the crowd about his story to keep moving forward.
Let's not let my stars or your stars define us.
And a Rathdrum man, part of the Post Falls Honor Guard, who lost his fiancée while both were working in the Pentagon on September 11th.
The building blew up, and 22 hours later, I went home alone. She didn't. She stayed there. So she died there. That's why I do this.
He is now finally sharing his story.
Life choices, I guess, is my reflection. is we never know what's going to happen, just like the key speaker today.
And this year, as 9/11 falls just one day after the assassination of Republican figure Charlie Kirk, there was a shared understanding within the crowd that the next day isn't always guaranteed. I'm reporting in Coeur d'Alene, Regan Gallo, KREM 2 News.
Welcome back. Before we wrap up this edition of the KREM 2 News Week in Review, we want to remind you that you can get the latest newscast and weather forecast anytime on KREM 2 Plus. It's free to watch and download for Roku, Amazon Fire, and on Apple TV. Now here's one more story before we go.
Ask any boxer and they'll tell you there's nothing easy about the sport. To be any good, you have to put in the work. And that's exactly what Rick Welliver says Jacobo Malaya has done.
He's learned that if you keep showing up and you work hard at something, anything's possible. And you know, he's been a big part of our gym.
Welliver's a former professional boxer and owner of Spokane Boxing Gym. He's worked with countless athletes over the years, few with as compelling of a story as Jacobo's.
Yeah, you got people that are always looking for excuses to not box. I can't do this and this is why and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you can. You can box. That kid over there's overcame dozens of operations. Look at him. Look what he's done. Look what he's overcame.
Long before Jacobo stepped foot in the ring, he spent years at Shriners Hospital. Born in Tanzania, he broke his leg as a young boy and it was never properly set. He likely had a bone infection at some point too when doctors in Africa didn't think they could fix it and instead wanted to amputate. Jacobo says his mom had other ideas and so did the doctors at Shriners.
We looked at him and kind of said, well, yeah, we can make you walk better again. We basically put the two ends that weren't connected, get that to heal back together with the surgery, and then we had to lengthen the bone back out over time to make it the same size as the other side.
Video from the hospital's motion analysis lab shows the remarkable results over time. After several surgeries, countless hours of rehab, and a whole lot of work, Jacobo was finally able to walk, run, and jump just like any other kid. 4 years ago, he says his life changed again when he found boxing.
It's pretty unbelievable because, you know, if you told me like in 2010 I'd be out here boxing and doing all these other activities that I would never think I would do, it's crazy.
Now 21 years old, stronger and more experienced, Jacobo recently conquered another goal.
In the blue corner, we have Jacobo Miaja, Spokane Boxing, Spokane, Washington.
After years of training, last month he entered the Pendleton Boxing Classic, a sanctioned amateur tournament in Oregon. He won both of his fights and came home a champion.
Do you think this was like a big hurdle to overcome, getting this victory?
Yeah, it was a big hurdle because I was so nervous and, you know, just mental, everything. So it was really big. But I'm glad I got over it because it really showed me that just you can do anything when you set your mind to it.
Jacobo plans to keep training and fighting with his sights set on nationals and the Golden Gloves. Lofty goals for sure, but attainable according to Welliver.
Yeah, he could be a professional fighter. I know it's quick to say that, but if he gives us 5 good years, you know, in 5 years, that conversation could be like, what's next?
For now, Jacobo says he'll keep showing up, keep putting in the work, and do what he's done since he was a young boy, beat the odds.
Boxing is definitely something I didn't think I was going to do because I was just a scared kid, but I feel like boxing helped me overcome those fears too. So I feel like it's just an unbelievable thing. If you put your mind to it and everything and your heart, you can really do a lot of things you want to.
Nice.
Thank you for spending part of your weekend with us on the KREM 2 News Week in Review. Be sure to keep it here on KREM 2 for more news and weather updates. I'm Cody Proctor. Thanks for watching.